Hello, friends. Welcome once again to the Perfect Bound Podcast. This is a podcast all about anything and everything comic books and comics related, brought to you by the Panel Jumper and Comics Dungeon. My name is Ben. With me, as always, is Nicole Lamb.
Hello.
Chris Casso.
Hello.
And, of course, Mr. Cole Hornaday.
Hey there.
How is everybody today?
Okay.
I'm taking pictures of all the cameras we got recording us.
We have a lot of cameras.
All right.
It's like a cathedral of GoPros.
It's cooled off nicely here in Seattle, and it's a nice reprieve. Although I am taking a vacation soon, and I will be driving around the Southwest, so I get to experience the heat once more before it leaves. I had originally planned this trip for July, but apparently I was warned off of that because then if I just stepped out of the car, I would catch fire.
You would melt.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Combustion. Instant combustion.
Are you going to Arizona?
We'll be going through Arizona.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was visiting my parents, and my dad just preemptively gave me burn cream. He knows what I'm
Good
like.
dad. Yes.
Who cares?
Yeah. So I came across this question recently about superheroes that don't fight crime. So I wanted to ask y'all, were there instances where superheroes, where they don't fight a supervillain, where maybe they fight, they deal with a conflict other than fighting a supervillain, like worldwide hunger or climate change or other.
I thought you just said robot hunger.
Or robot hunger.
Yes.
So do we have any examples of instances where superheroes do not fight crime?
I've got a bunch. Do you have any to go with?
Well, right off the top of my head is one of my favorite characters, Paul Chadwick's Concrete.
Yeah.
Who's the story of a man who's trapped in a stone cybernetic body, and because he was never a heroic being to begin with, he was a speechwriter and an intellectual with these superpowers or this monster body. He goes out and does adventurous things. He climbs Everest. He actually solves a crime. He works on a movie set. He crosses the ocean by walking across the bottom of the ocean, and all these spectacular things that no normal human being could do. But that also, I think the key point that Paul Chadwick was working toward was to give us a fantastical character in a real world context.
Right.
And the other characters I could only think of off the top of my head were our favorite swamp people, Swamp Thing and Man Thing. Now, Man Thing actually does fight crazy bad guys, but for a while, particularly Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, they were all horror stories and dealt with horror tropes and mysticism. So he was saving the world, but he wasn't necessarily dealing with other caped and masked bad guys. And again, it was about context.
Alan Moore wrote stories about mysticism?
Weird, right?
Jeez.
Wow.
Do you remember when Alex Ross did those giant treasury-size Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman?
I still have the Shazam one it is sitting on my couch. I have a couch that now is a makeshift bookshelf because that's where all the comics and books sit that I can read hopefully within the next month.
Okay.
Okay, and the Shazam one has been sitting there for 6 months.
Do you remember
So, yes.
when did those come out? I forgot to write that down on my research.
No, off the top of my head, I do not. I want to say it was the late 90s, early 2000s.
I'm going to say they're 15 years old, probably.
Yeah.
So Alex Ross did a group of books that were each character-focused pieces, and Superman was Peace on Earth, Shazam was Power of Hope, Wonder Woman was Spirit of Truth, and Batman was War on Crime. The Superman one was Superman specifically dealing with poverty and starvation, and him trying to basically take care of it and failing horrible because people prevented him from doing so, and then him getting sad. They didn't really solve anything. But by the end of it, they ended with some sort of like, teach a man to fish and he can farm or something.
Geez.
And it's like, okay, whatever. Something like that.
They really were just vehicles for Alex Ross's stupendous artwork.
They're painty books.
And they're giant books.
Yeah.
They're like 11 by 17 giant tabloid books.
The Shazam one was about helping sick children in hospitals. So basically, Shazam just went around and made kids happy. It was like,
Aw,
okay, that was
that's
nice.
sweet.
Yeah, and giving them hope. Wonder Woman was all over the place. It was her basically having like a crisis of personality, and then she just went around the world dressed up as like a doctor, a soldier, and something else, and just did other stuff besides being Wonder Woman. I forget most of the rest of that one. And Batman just fought crime, which is what he does all the time. So it was about crime as a social thing. So I guess that's different than supervillains.
Right.
Beyond that, we should always remember to mention the Green Arrow, Green Lantern by Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil, because they dealt with overpopulation and drug addiction and fascism, pollutionism,
Yes.
and all the other isms that are bad. So that's all I could really remember, other than Captain Planet, guys like that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Do you have any, Nicole?
Yeah, I was thinking of like the Occupy Avengers series that David Walker did a little while ago when Hawkeye killed the Hulk. He went off and he hung out with why do I keep forgetting his name? Red
Wolf.
Red Wolf, thank you. I keep wanting to call him Red Hawk. I have no idea why. And he was helping, helping people with like water crises and stuff. And like bad people would show up, but like he was doing a lot of stuff on like ground level, helping the little guy.
It was right around the time of the pipeline.
Yes,
The
it was
real
right
world
around the time of the
pipeline stuff,
so
and
it
so they
was
dealt with
mirroring
that.
a lot of that stuff.
Standing Rock.
And the whole premise was that, and we've heard it before, that superheroes cause a lot of destruction and they don't really help like the people on the ground level kind of thing. They're trying to do the earth shattering blah blah blah, so there's a
Right.
lot of casualty, and so Hawkeye was coming down to the ground level on that and trying to help with stuff, and there was some political aspects to it as well. And I think that the Vision is one, because he's fighting being human because being human is awful and everything goes wrong. And then I thought like Hickman's New Avengers. In the Avengers, they were fighting some big bad. In New Avengers, they were fighting the cataclysmic event of all the multiverses just hitting each other and everything being destroyed. So it was literally earth-shattering, but there wasn't necessarily like the big bad. I mean,
Right.
they're fighting their inner demons because they had to be on a team, and they're really bad team
Forgot
players.
all about the the Vision series. Which
Yeah, the
was
Vision, I think, is
all about the hell of suburbia and just surviving your neighbors.
And like, just trying,
Well-
trying to be human when that is not the perfect form, Yeah.
Yep.
And alcoholism, Tony
Stark is
has
doing
fought
it.
alcoholism before. And then I then wrote something by Judd Winnick.
Yeah. So there's the ice. When she mentioned that, Judd Winnick had John Walsh from America's Most Wanted show up, and they dealt with missing children.
Okay.
So Judd Winnick would very, very much try to fit in as many social issues as he could and be contemporary. He talked about AIDS, and he also, I thought he did a political one called like something red, something blue, and we all were like, oh, this is Superman red, Superman blue, but it was just Democrat versus Republicans in the DC universe. So we're still fighting evil at that point.
Super villains.
So,
But I'm sure there's something in there, right? At some
Yeah,
point that counts.
When these superheroes are just dealing with like everyday human problems and not supervillains or like big monsters crawling from the sky, is it usually just one-offs? Are these Elseworld stories, or do they deal with real world problems in this standard run of a title?
it'll take the form in both ways. Sometimes
Yeah.
it'll be a short run. Judd Winnick would try to fit it into the regular run, and it might run for a bit. But most of the ones I mentioned were just self-contained, one-shot little guys. So it just depends. I think a lot of writers find themselves... it's difficult to go too long dealing with something like, let's talk about healthcare in comics.
Right.
Just like, because you're not going to solve that.
Sooner or later,
You
you're gonna have to punch a bad guy
Yeah,
just to
exactly.
maintain your superhero status.
Exactly. Or you're going to lose your readership. Something like
Right.
that.
I mean, on occasion, we've had books that the superheroes solve the world's problems.
Yeah.
We did it with the Authority, the Squadron Supreme,
Miracle Man.
and those stories for a period of time are refreshing. It's like, okay, but ultimately I think the writers always come around to pointing their finger at our protagonist being a fascist, because there's some fascistic aspect of control and displacement of free will in order to make things happen, because that super being is dictating on a certain level how we're going to live our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At this point, I wouldn't mind so much, but I would eventually shirk under that yoke of authority, because it's going to be authority.
Well, and then the flip is, if it doesn't turn them into completely fascists, and it actually is a peaceful utopia, the horribleness of humanity will always cause it to be undone.
Yep.
That's usually what happens in most of the other ones. I remember. It's just
because
that,
we can't have nice things.
exactly. Yeah.
I also, as far as like superhero stories as escapism goes, I can understand them not wanting to deal with social issues too often, because when you're reading your escapist books, it's something that you do to get away from the outside, but they bring the outside in, and whatever that problem is, they solve it. Oh, hooray for that world. I walk outside, there's still homelessness and hunger in the world.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess that these types of titles are few and far between. It's not really a common, this is it's this time of year where Superman deals with the climate change.
They kind of leave it alone as
Yeah.
much as dude. Oh, I just remembered a horrible one.
Oh, awesome!
There was
Lay
the
it on us.
time that J. Michael Straczynski had Superman walk across the country because he was sad, and because some lady was mad at him because he punched a meteorite, but she didn't cure her husband of cancer, and it's just one of those like, it doesn't. There's not a reason to slap Superman, but Superman was like, "Oh, you're right. I need to think about this," and he just walked across the country and met different people's problems, including like abuse issues and environmental issues and some other things. It was atrocious and horrible. I don't want any superheroes to deal with real life problems anymore. That just reminded me of why I hate that.
All right. Stick to punching bad people. All right. Well, thank you, friends. Let's move on and talk about something that we brought up a couple of weeks ago. We had mentioned the TV show The Orville and how it is more of a homage to Star Trek than the new Star Trek is. So I want to talk about what properties are out there that are both send-ups and homages to their original source material. And no fair saying the Orville, because we already brought that up.
Oh, we can't go into detail of why the Orville actually works?
Actually, since we're talking about it,
right.
let's go into detail.
All
why
right,
it
well,
works.
why don't we start out slow, okay? Why don't we talk, I have to mention Galaxy Quest.
Yeah.
And Galaxy Quest was actually a success as a film because it not only was it a celebration and send-up of Star Trek, of the show, but it was very much a meta story because it was about the fallen careers of actors who were in this show that had a limited run on television and had a terrific fan following. And Galaxy Quest is also about fan culture, and they all kind of come together in this wacky sci-fi adventure that kind of just amazed me about how successful it actually was. How it was really. How this as a story it did work. It poked all the right fingers, or poked holes in all the right places, and still left you enjoying the film and loving the properties that it was sending up, which I thought was like, it's a really delicate dance that just amazed me. Mm-hmm. And I think the Orville does that in a unique way, but if you were not going to convince me that Seth MacFarlane had that type of delicacy of storytelling, because the man is a battle axe when it comes to trying. He doesn't know what subtlety means. I think he thinks he does. I think he gets out of bed in the morning, he puts his toothbrush in his mouth, and he looks himself in the mirror and says, "I know all about subtlety," but he doesn't. And the wonderful thing about the Orville is that, and I was kind of re-examining this perception as I'm watching there's a station called Heroes and Icons. I think it's 116 on the cable dial, where in the evening you've got a 3-hour block of all the Star Trek shows. You can watch Next Gen, then DS9, and then Voyager. And I remember I'd forgotten how the design aesthetic all kind of tied together, and they worked very, very, very hard to give you a shared reality that was, you believed it all. Well, the Orville borrows all of that design aesthetic, the ships, the costumes, the interiors of the ship, all looks like, even the effects look like Next Gen. The plots for the first season are all borrowed straight from classic Trek. Everyone you watch, you go, okay, that's lifted from, The Earth is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky, or, Who Mourns for Adonis, or, I don't need to be a jerk and, rattle off any more episode titles because I know them by heart.
Spock's Brain,
Spock's
That Which
Brain.
Survives.
There we go. Mud's Women. The thing that is interesting about the Orville is that, have you guys watched it?
I have not seen it.
Only snippets.
Only snippets? I'm the only one
I
at the
had to
table?
keep looking it up every time I went to do the podcast because I kept forgetting what it was.
I'm recognizing the fact that it might help to be, pretty heavily versed in the Star Trek shows from the 90s. And if you're not, it may not work for you that successfully. But I watched them all, and and that was like a communal ritual for my friends when I lived in Wisconsin. Is that we would stop and make dinner on Sunday night and have everybody come over and watch whatever Star Trek show was on. So that was a community bonding thing we did. So I was pretty close to the show. And if you told me that this was that Seth MacFarlane was going to be doing this, I was all set to be offended. What he's brought to the show is all of the tonal qualities of the original Star Trek, or not original, but the Pillar Berman, the Roddenberry shows from the 90s. But then he's added this patina of wiseassery to it. And I almost want to call it a working class sensibility, but I don't think that's really apt or fair. But the guys that are the helmsmen of the ship are these two buddies. They're bros, and they might as well be truck drivers. They might as well be driving a ferry or something. So they bring that quality into these conflicts with other cultures and whatnot. I actually urge you guys to watch it. I think it's really interesting because I think it's, dare I say it, a very postmodern show because it takes this stuff from almost a traditional aspect of pop culture or literature and then pushes it through its own grinder, makes its own thing, but when it comes out the other side, it's still a celebration of that which the source material.
Would you say it views better if you have an extensive knowledge of original Star Trek or without?
That's a really hard call and I'm the wrong person to ask.
Gotcha.
Because I grew up watching the original show, and I watched all the other shows. But here's the deal: is that I have watched very few episodes of Discovery because I can't get access to it, and I refuse to play the cable streaming service game with ABC All Access. I'm just done with that business. So I saw like 3 or 4 episodes at a friend's place and was overwhelmed visually. I lost the story. I lost the characters because the visuals, the design was so epic. And I'm also watching this, watching it on this big screen TV that's like the size of the wall of my living room. I mean, it's like massive and high def, and I think I was just kind of overwhelmed with all that, overstimulated.
Discovery also looks like a very dark show.
Yeah.
Like dark, lighting wise.
Yes, it
very
is.
dark. Whereas Orville is bright and
Like
you can see everything.
Yeah, like the Next Gen. Everything is well lit. You're right. All the palette is very muted and soft, and Discovery is dark, harsh colors, jagged edges, and
Lots of murder.
Lots of murder. Yeah. So yeah, I'm looking forward to actually watching Discovery to see to find for myself if it's our Star Trek for the new millennia, or is it just more of the same with a more a garish package, because I do feel it was a little garish.
I think going along the same Star Trek bent was the first episode of the latest season of Black Mirror, which was, I can't remember the name of the episode, but it's a very Star Trek. It has a Star Trek element to it. And I went back because I thought, was the name of the show that the game that he was in called Space Force? But no, it was Space Fleet inside Black Mirror. But yeah, it was very much, I felt that they were sending up the J.J. Abrams Star Trek Star Trek movies in that specific episode, just because of all the primary colors and the lens flares and like the design choices of the virtual reality game there. But it was very well done. Yeah. And I really enjoyed that aspect of the episode as far as like the science fiction design is concerned.
And that episode is a scathing examination of nerd culture and nerd entitlement, nerd rage. It's, I don't know, have you guys seen that episode? Is it the third season of Black Mirror?
It's the most recent. Yeah. I don't know which one.
I highly recommend it because it really is a pretty damning cross-examination of nerd rage and nerd entitlement and abuse. So like Gamergate kind of.
Yeah.
Basically, it's an examination of Gamergate in a lot of ways. Well, let's not overlook Venture Brothers. You got it?
Yeah.
You want to roll on that?
No, we were trying to figure out some more, and that was one that I wish I thought of, but you hit me first on that one.
It's okay. We were in a fog. We were trying to figure out what was both. What was the send up and homage?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
But perfect homage of not only Johnny Quest, but tons of superhero stuff and pretty much anything they could get their hands on.
Yeah.
You know.
I am rewatching Venture Brothers right now. I have not seen any of the new 7th season, but I love the show so much and I don't trust my memory that I want to go back and I discovered they have them all at the library, so I've been getting them all again. And that first season is when they're feeling their way, and I mean they don't make any qualms about saying this. We are swiping on Johnny Quest, but they also they kill Roger Race Bannon, and I remember seeing that episode and actually being offended because Johnny Quest is probably my favorite Hanna-Barbera property, and they kill him in this brutal way, and then they humiliate his dead body, So and then Johnny shows up and he's a drug addict.
Don't pay homage to then.
Well, it was mean. It was like, am I going to enjoy this show? Because right now it just feels like it's mean, and I don't know why they're being mean about this property other than they can. I mean, is Johnny Quest dated? Yes. Is it sexist? Yes. There's some racist aspects to it. Oh my goodness. Is it frustrating to watch some of those episodes?
You're giving me all the reasons to go ahead and kill that guy now.
Yeah, seriously.
Well, but Race Bannon doesn't do all those things. Race Bannon's a good guy. He's the mother you've always wanted to have.
How can you not trust a guy whose first name is Race?
That's right. And then eventually in the series, we meet Johnny, and he's been living in the Quest bathysphere, and he's like a heroin addict.
Oh, yeah.
And he's only in his underwear, which is
always in his underwear.
That was weird.
And I've gotten to the 3rd season, and Haji finally shows up, but they don't call him Haji. They call him by a different name, but it's very obvious that it is Haji. Don't know where Bandit is. I think Bandit's long dead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
No. I love the Fantastic Four send-up they do in there.
It's so good.
Where the Reed Richards is just such a terrible human.
Stephen Colbert does his voice.
Yeah.
I think the thing about this, we need to find a name for this genre of celebration and send up. We got to find a name for it.
Speaking of the Fantastic Four, would y'all consider the Incredibles as part of this?
Yeah.
Would they be? Would they
I
be
think so.
A send up and an homage?
Yeah. See, we were one of the problems I was trying to figure out is like, well, once you get into superheroes, we already have the words for those. We have analog and we have archetypes. So we're just in a different genre at this point. And so you can use the same words.
It's also the element of celebratory because we see the alternative superheroes, but they're not necessarily celebratory. It's just someone who wants to tell a superhero story.
Right.
So there's an extra component to it too.
But I think this is where we're going with storytelling, and I think we're going to see a lot more of this in American pop culture storytelling. I think it's going to be kind of pro forma, that it'll be something that something borrowed, something blue. And And the beauty of it that fascinates me is how these properties evolve and become their own. Because in so doing this, Orville becomes its own thing. And we've got 7 seasons of Venture Brothers to prove that it has the forward momentum to poach successfully and then evolve on its own. And it's not like, oh, it's an homage because it was inspired by it. It's like, no, we are ripping this from the pages of the source material. And then we're going to eat it and we're going to digest it and then we're going to pass it out and then you're going to like it.
All the way on that cycle.
I went all the way.
Human centipede of storytelling.
I don't actually want to talk about the next thing I was going to talk about after that.
Oh, really?
Because I was going to mention Goldie Vance right after
yeah.
Human Centipede.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there's some comic books that we feel like do some of that as well. Goldie
Yep.
Vance does that with
Nancy Drew.
like a Nancy Drew element in a 1950s flair, very celebratory, fun, and with modern twists on it as well.
I was going to mention Delicious in Dungeon because it does the tribute and the loving tribute towards Dungeons and Dragons, but it throws in the cooking element to that. It is always worth mentioning Usagi Jimbo. The first 5 or 6 books of that are based off of Akira Kurosawa films, so they're old tributes, and then he evolves after that and starts doing other things. So to what you were saying, where you think pop culture is going to move forward with more of that, I'd like to see it integrate more cross-culture material. Adapt and tribute more Japanese work and other cultures.
I guess what I'm saying is that it's a property that's really clear. It's really obvious this is where you're taking it from, and then it evolves. And so I'm concerned that something from different cultures, there are going to be enough buoyancy of familiarity with the material in order for that to work. There's something else, but there's Do you
have anything else?
Cerebus the Aardvark.
Okay.
Cerebus the Aardvark started out as a parody of Barry Windsor Smith's Conan comics, and then 300 issues later,
It became a parody of itself.
ultimately, yeah. I mean, if you, I actually read every dang issue, and I have yet to meet anyone else who has. And we talked about it years ago on the show. It's like, I don't know what to do with all these books because I'm not going to read them again.
You've done your time. You're over it.
I did my due diligence, man. Yeah, Dave Sim owes me. Anyway.
Any final send-ups and homages to mention before we move on?
It's something that I'm going to keep my eye open for because
Right.
because I'm really curious. I'm kind of excited of what our storytelling is becoming, because we're recycling and repurposing in really interesting ways.
Okay.
I wrote down Bucky OHare
Why so?
because I was just happy to remember him. No, because he's a send-up to Flash Gordon, Flash Rogers.
Flash
Buck
Rogers. Yeah.
So again, it's an archetype basically.
Funny animals.
But so you kind of get that Flash Gordon and Star Wars, but it was repurposed for children.
Yeah.
And
Sadly, it didn't have a chance to evolve into its own. And it had all the possibilities. You had the comics, you had the cartoon, you had all the toys that are all forgotten now.
Yep.
Except by you, Chris. Except by you.
Hey, they made a coloring book last year. Somebody remembered.
Really?
Yeah.
Did Mike Golden draw it?
I think it's all just lifts from his art.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Wow.
Alrighty. Cool.
Made.
Well, thank you, friends. Let's move on to book report now. And Cole Horn today, let's start with you. What do you want to tell us
Jeez.
about?
This is going to be a short one. Okay, so I read Frank Miller's Xerxes, The Fall of the House of Darius and the Rise of Alexander. So this is a long-awaited sequel to his book 300. It's one of 5. And this is the most uninspired piece of comic book art I have seen in a very, very long time. There are a lot of artists who evolve in their style, and many of the artists that I grew up enjoying, they as they get older, they have to simplify because they're tired, or that they've learned to make less out of more and become more succinct in their storytelling. That is not true with Frank Miller. Frank Miller is just gotten sloppier and sloppier and sloppier. He takes incredible license with history. Now, granted, we're talking about ancient Greece and Thebes and whatnot. So, who knows how accurate it is? But it's just one more opportunity for Frank Miller to be violent and hateful towards humanity.
And uber macho.
And he's not even doing it very well anymore. It's like I said, I can't think of anything sadder than to look at an artist's work that is clearly uninspired, but they believe it to be. And Chris and I have talked about this a lot. It really doesn't matter because people are going to buy this book because it's Frank Miller, because he's a rock star creator, and just like the last Dark Knight series and the Superman series that were such atrocities, they'll sell relatively well, and they'll be in a quarter bin in probably less than a couple of years. I'm not going to finish reading this series. I will wait until it comes out in a trade.
Did you get this out of our dollar bins?
No, this is brand new.
Oh, okay.
This is brand new. In fact, you said that's the last one on the stand. I'm glad you're ordering it because I want to get it out of the store.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I did say that.
Do I have a grudge against him for a number of reasons? Yeah, isn't it clear in the sound of my voice and the tone of my words? But I look at, there are so many hungry artists out there looking for an opportunity to express themselves. And when I look at an artist this old, this jaded, and this bored with what they're doing, I wish they'd go do something else and leave the space open for another creator.
Okay, then.
Yeah.
That's a book you're going to throw across the room, right?
Oh, yeah, we haven't thrown stuff in a while.
I haven't thrown anything for a while. I don't have the energy to throw this because I just don't care that much.
All right.
Flop it down,
Yep.
call it a day.
Yep.
Frank Miller Xerxes. Thank you, Cole. Chris Casso, what do you got for us?
So I read, I'm only halfway through, a little bit past halfway through, so I might return on a future episode to finish this. So it is a book. It is a prose book by Tim Pilcher called Comic Book Babylon, a cautionary tale of sex, drugs, and comics. And it's supposed to be about Vertigo's British office, which is an interesting concept. I would have to check the dates on this. I think this exists because Grant Morrison's memoir book, Super Gods, mentioned about how the Vertigo offices were, there's a pull quote here, the equivalent of the loaded HQ in the 90s, vodka, mushrooms, ES, sex, money, travel, and the pure unleashed creativity of young people having a good time together. So, Tim Pilcher was an editor that worked for the Vertigo HQ office. And the first, 86 pages of this book, it is only 135 pages, is all about like his youth and getting into comics and finding comic book stores and stuff like that. It's kind of interesting, but not for me personally, because I've already read a couple books like that, and I'm kind of... If there's money to be made in talking about working in comic book stores, y'all need to tell me that, and I need to go make that money right now because I don't think it's interesting personally because I've lived it and it's not that interesting. The only difference here is you got to try and figure out what half the British terms mean and the comparison.
Does it have a glossary?
No, maybe in the back. No, I don't know. So it's not that interesting to me. And the thing is, so he doesn't start talking about the Vertigo stuff until past the halfway point. And that's where it gets slightly interesting because there you start getting this like minor technical stuff. Like they have a term called ballooning where the editors are the ones to figure out the complete layout of the word balloons because they don't trust the letterers to do it. And it's like, I want to hear about you guys getting sassy with the letterers about this. So it starts getting interesting at that point, and that's where I might start to care more about this book, which is why I might return like 2 or 3 episodes from now and finish up the review. As it is, it's just a little dull for me. It might not be for other readers just because they they don't read much about, comic book stores or the behind the scenes. But reading the Grant Morrison one, there's a lot of the same terminology because they probably grew up roughly around the same time, and they read the same British comics and the same American comics that made it over to the UK, and so there's just a lot of familiarity for me here, and I'm like, yeah, I don't really care. Yeah.
Also, it's just not getting to the meat of what it's actually called.
It took too
long. What it's
long.
supposed to be about. That just seems like get to the point already.
I understand the need for some background because it's nice to set up that you met all these comic book creators when you ran a comic book store, but it just it takes a while, to get there, and I'm just sort of like, get to it already. So it's a $25 book. Wow. Okay, this was gifted to me, so that's way too much money for this. And I'll return and talk about what's interesting.
Cole's making a great face.
Well, it's like
thin.
Yeah,
It's just
but not only that,
snarls all around.
it's pulp paper and lightweight paper,
And it's pretty. It's like
it's a perfect bound book,
biggish
and-
words. Yeah,
and
You could probably
that's-
read that in a quick afternoon.
That's not. I mean, that
I
must
just been reading it on my bus trips because I don't want to put much more time into
Yeah.
it. So I'll probably finish it in 2 days, and that's why by the time we start recording again, I'll have it completely finished.
Right
And
on.
so yeah, we'll return to that. But it's not the worst thing I've read, but it's just kind of like, meh, okay.
dude. It's not Xerxes.
Yeah, good point. Good
All
point.
right, cool. Thank you, Chris. And finally, Nicole, what do you got for us?
So I will be reviewing Alisic.
Alisic.
Alisic. It's already off to a bad start, guys.
Just push through, baby. Just push through.
Just push through. So this was one. So first, it's written by Umbertus Ruffled. I'm sorry, and it's co-written and art by Halage Vote. I know Vote because my grandfather's name is Vote. There you go. Great. Okay. So this appealed to me because it had this real like Tim Burton-esque, creepy doll, corpse bride feel to the art, which it really appeals to me. I'm a spooky kid at heart, and so I was looking forward to this. The premise is that this girl wakes up dead in a graveyard, as one does. She's a ghost, and she is trapped in a purgatory state with a bunch of other people who have been there for seemingly a very long time. There's a agent of the Grim Reaper that comes by and may or may not choose you to go to heaven or hell. Generally speaking, these people have been trapped here for a while, so they're stuck in purgatory until further notice. Meanwhile, you don't know what happened to the girl. She's just kind of wandering through this. She doesn't know how she died. And you get some backstory on some of the other characters. And then, of course, there's some boy traveling through the graveyard, and he's so dreamy, and he's blind, but he can hear dead people. So, because that's apparently how that works. And they start to sort of form a relationship. So it's got this tweeny romance element to it. This is called Fall, so I think it's supposed to be seasonal, which was a little unfortunate. There's some things I want to read, and I just want to be done with them. Like, I want to be like, that was great, and just be like,
Moving on.
good job. So I was kind of disappointed that this was an ongoing, because you don't get the resolve. She's still like, I don't know what's going on. That's how I imagine that she sounds anyway. She's got super rosy cheeks. So I was overall a little disappointed with this book. The pacing was a little all over the place. You get some of her story, then we're jumping over here, and we're talking about this woman who had two guys that loved her, and then they died, and then she was sad. And so, I think if I was like 12 and like a scene kid and was just like, I wish I could love somebody one day, then I would probably be all about this book. I think it's good for the spooky tweens, which is good because I usually have spooky kids books. Now I have spooky tween books. It's just not for me, even though I love things at 35 years old that are for 5-year-olds. For some reason, this doesn't hit for me. So I I may check out more if it comes out just to kind of see, but it would be like way on
Right.
down on my pile at this point.
Is this our first ever triple negative review?
It might be.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's a history's being made here.
Yeah, look
Well,
at
it's
this.
about time.
We're just all
people.
grumpy today.
It's all roses usually, right?
Yeah.
So
Now,
finally,
we got some thorns. All right.
that's
We got-
right.
Alice sick. Thank you, Nicole. Anyway, well, that's Book Report, and coming up is quiz time. But before we go, I want to tell you that the Perfect Bound podcast is brought to you by the Panel Jumper. See everything Cole Hornaday and I do at thepaneljumper.com, as well as Comic Extension here at 319 Northeast 45th Street, beautiful downtown Wallingford, or 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at comicextension.com. Subscribe to the show on iTunes or however you get your podcasts at perfectboundpodcast.com. Send us an email, perfectboundpodcast@gmail.com. And our friends, get your quiz hats on. It's quiz time this week. Our questions are coming to us from Mr. Cole Hornaday.
Okay, so I'm calling this quiz time a dejected hive of scub. No, I am tired. A dejected hive of dub and villainy. A quiz time devoted to bad guys who tried really, really hard to be evil, but only had success at being lame. This particular bad guy developed a mighty mucilage propelled by a pair of projectile weapons. A pilot member of the Frightful Four, this fourth-tier nemesis changed his original moniker after tussling with Spider-Man, who couldn't stop laughing at him following their introduction. Always easily beaten by the good guys and eventually abandoned by his teammates in the Frightful Four, this villain is pretty much a failure at every level.
Paste Pot Pete.
Trapster, also known as Peter Petruski, also known as Paste Pot Pete. The Trapster first appeared in Strange Tales number 104 in January of 1963. But what? I have a codicil! To Mr. Petruski's credit, in 1994, the U.S. military began developing a non-lethal spray foam to restrain insurgents without causing them physical harm. Dubbed sticky foam or riot foam, the spray substance is an extremely tacky, tenacious material used to block, entangle, and impair individuals. Mr. Petruski, you are redeemed. This gliding member of... Oh, wait. Oh, I got this out of order for Pete's sake. Oh, I am just failing left and right. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm okay. This gliding member of Batman's Rogues Gallery originally found early employment as the supervillain you go to break your fellow crooks out of prison using his specially designed full-body kites. He would suffer many humiliating defeats at the hands of Batman, Hawkman, and Hawkgirl.
Kite Man?
Yeah.
Kite Man, whose real name is apparently Charlie Brown. No lie. Yeah. Kite Man was created by Bill Finger and Dick Sprang and originally appeared in Batman number 133 in August of 1960. But what? I have a codicil! The modern wingsuit, first developed in the late 90s, creates a surface area with fabric between the legs and underarms. The wingsuits are sometimes referred to as Birdman suits. After the maker's first commercially available wingsuit, or flying squirrel suits due to their resemblance to the animal, the squirrel, and bat suits due to their resemblance to the animal or perhaps even the superhero.
Take a brief breath.
No, it's better when I hyperventilate because it goes faster. Yeah. A longtime foe of Daredevil, this rogue scientist turned thief developed a suit of armor replete with lengthy telescoping legs.
Stiltman.
Stiltman, a.k.a. Wilbur Day, was created by Wally Wood and first appeared in Daredevil number 8 in June of 1965. But wait, I have a codicil! Powerbalking is a sport that has popped up around spring-loaded suits. Stilts. Invented by German engineer Alec Bach in the 1990s, the jumping stilts have fiberglass leaf springs that are attached to curved aluminum frame that I can see you guys laughing. That tapers to a foot plate called the hoof. And then if folks can therefore jump 3 to 5 feet or take 9-foot kangaroo strides and run 20 miles per hour. Verily, it's like a trampoline attached to your feet. Moving on. This lesser-known nemesis of Hank Pym, this villain, this is a lesser-known nemesis of Hank Pym. This villain has the ability to, with a swipe of his hand, wipe away any adversary while simultaneously transporting them to a predetermined location. An alien from another dimension, this character has attempted to overwhelm Giant Man, the Wasp, and once attempted to kidnap She-Hulk before blinking out of existence.
The Eraser?
The Living Eraser, created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, first appeared in Tales to Astonish number 49, 1963. Now, Stan Lee has openly admitted to opening up the dictionary at random to find ideas for supervillains during this period of Marvel Comics. It's not a stretch to see him doing this, so in this case. And there's no codicil living eraser. It's just really super lame. Okay, lastly, finally, one more villain from Batman's Rogues Gallery. This villain gives the game away a little with his name, as he's fixated on dates and coincides his crimes with certain holidays through the year. Of course, this means it's pretty easy to guess when he's going to strike. Considering from whence he took his name, he's really not very good at planning.
Calendar Man.
Calendar Man was created by Bill Finger and Sheldon Molotov and first appeared in Detective Comics number 259 in September of 1958. But wait! Well, not really. It's just an addendum. Calendar Man's best-known modern appearance is in the miniseries Batman the Long Halloween, where he is portrayed as a Hannibal Lecter-like figure, offering insight into Batman's search for Holiday, a serial killer who uses holidays as his M.O. Like Hannibal Lecter in the novels by Thomas Harris, Calendar Man knows who the killer is and keeps this information to himself, choosing instead to taunt the heroes with cryptic clues. He eventually returns in the story sequel, Batman Dark Victory, in which he impersonates a deceased mobster, Carmine Falcone, in an effort to drive his children, Alberto and Mario, insane.
All right. Thank you, Cole.
But wait!
There is no more, and we are blessed with this.
All right. Thank you, Cole. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next week.